Hello, welcome. Um, Hello. Most of you I know already, but my name is Laura. I've been with Thomas, one of the artists in residency at Zaratan. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about mostly what I was working on here. So in the upstairs two studios, I came in wanting to think about sort of work that started percolating in my mind a couple of years ago about sculpture rather than as an object, as a record of an event. So more like an imprint or a landscape, and rather than some sort of permanent object. So part of the reason I started thinking through it like this was thinking about the idea of what we memorialize. Like, objects hold so much weight, so thinking of some sort of monument or memorial that's a lot more fluid, that's can either have change over time or it doesn't memorialize a moment in history, but memorializes, say, this like performative event. So I started working through these ideas, especially to get this kind of temporal shift and change. It made sense, especially once the pandemic had started, because usually I work in ceramics and performance, and so without really, it kind of forced me, not having access really to the same facilities and kilns to make more traditional objects, starting to work with these materials that are more organic, that I could grow, or, you know, like raw clay, algae, things that I could like harvest, cultures like kombucha scoby. And that also kind of had this nice, one, to just experiment with new materials, and also thinking through this sense of like a culture, like a bacteria culture, like a kombucha culture, has this fluidity and change to it, the same way that like our culture, the same thing that I was trying to get at in terms of human culture. So kind of this like overlapping, this like interspecies conversation, and like what is culture and how can that shift and change over time as sort of a moving object. So that's how kind of where I was at when I came to Zaratan, and I was also kind of starting to think through this idea of just materials in general. So in my ceramic process, I use a lot of minerals, oxides, just, you know, it's earth elements. So cobalt, manganese, and all of these things actually have like a real, if you go back in history, they have a lot of socio-political weight in terms of trade, colonialism, violence. They hold a lot of weight in terms of sort of how we are seen as in our subjecthood. You know, because at the same time these minerals are being traded, so humans are being traded. So it all kind of like thinking of this sort of time when this like extractive mentality sort of started, especially in more like Western world. So that's kind of like how I got to my materials list, is this sort of like tornado of all of these thoughts of the sort of mineral materials, these organic materials that can shift and change. And of course the minerals in the clay that I work with before it's fired is also in a real like shifting time scale as it's moving from like a glacial all the way to the store that you buy it at over sort of millennia. So what I ended up doing upstairs over the month was thinking of this idea of memorial, thinking of this idea also of getting out of that sort of trying to have these like embodied research practices of moving away from that extractive relationship to object or to mineral or to material. So I have a lot of like movement exercises in my practice, a lot of somatic elements in my practice. And I think on a sort of macro level, I'm really interested in using that embodied practice as these sort of like almost like training or collective experiences where there is less of these binaries and these otherings, either between human and nature or in gender or whatever it may be, sort of these situations where either your thought or your actual experience is sort of outside of that linear extractive thought process. So I trained in artificial intelligence on contemporary performance scores, essentially, to try and get at this kind of non-rational space. So using, to kind of take me out of the authorship of making this object or this sculpture, this record of a performance, I trained in AI on various contemporary movement scores. So I gave it basically a data set of all of these scores, these choreographic scores, fluxus scores, etc. So then I had this kind of collaborator in the form of this artificial intelligence. I, at the same time, was growing these kombucha scoby, mycelium, mushroom mycelium, agar, getting sort of a lot of, friends of the gallery were bringing sort of these various microbes and going to ceramic shops to get these raw minerals, these oxides. So kind of having this just like collaboration between the AI and this collaboration between growing the actual materials. And then I ended up setting them up on a grid. So the grid kind of representing this sort of rational extractive overlay on sort of land and how we relate to land. And then my minerals and materials laid out on that grid, being ready for this sort of performative event to happen. I played the bot, the AI, I named it Agnes, so it had like a serious artist name. So Agnes told me what to do. So that's, if you've been upstairs, that's the voice you hear in the video. So there's these just directives essentially. There's a lot of poetic license in the exchange because I didn't want to have an artificial intelligence that was what you would use, say, in like a surveillance, a more sort of like how it is sold as like a rational efficiency tool in capitalism. I wanted it to be like a poetic collaborator. So there's a lot of glitch and room for interpretation. I essentially followed the instructions of this sort of poetic artificial intelligence collaborator and what the sculpture or imprint or record of an event, the same way that like, you can like see the record of minerals in a mountain is what's there. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the short and confusing story of my mind. I think that, yeah, collaboration's really important to me, especially it's been difficult in COVID, so in this sense, it's almost like trying to expand sort of on this more cellular level to be collaborating with plants, collaborating with the yeasts in the air that are growing bacteria, collaborating with friends of friends who bring these scobies. So kind of thinking about these interconnected networks, both in the process of it that are beyond human and interspecies, and then in the sort of making of it as well. So taking away myself as a singular author as part of this practice of trying to get away from this sort of binary, othered way of moving through the world or moving through the art world. Yeah, and really trying to think about a sense of experimentation and body intelligence in the process. The last thing I'll say is just the the second sort of artificial intelligence, so the second voice, in the rooms upstairs, there's the video that has the sort of score bot, so this sort of 1970s through 2020 sort of archive or nod to sort of my lineage of contemporary dance. And then in the room with the sculpture, I trained another artificial intelligence, so a different data set of just my research on certain Aboriginal ways of being subjects and having the land be subject, so a different ontology where like a mountain is a relative, for instance. I trained it on ideas of like the production of space, which is kind of that Cartesian grid, laying that over land. I trained it on, what else did I train it on? Oh, celebrity conspiracy theories on the internet. I trained it on a lot of data on like lithium mining, especially like in the north of Portugal. So how we're getting, the materials then of AI, the materials of electric cars, batteries, mercury that goes in our computers. So kind of, the research of this mining and our subjecthood in relationship to land. And this is kind of just a continuation of using and thinking through process with organic, sort of through an ecosystem lens. So various sort of iterative structures, both in the process and in the product. Although so product, I put it in these air quotes because the sculpture is shifting and like rotting and decomposing upstairs as we speak. Hi. So that's the what. If you know, you know. Oh, you have a question? Okay.
Sculpture as a composing and decomposing process, and I cannot forget about how important suddenly it became the idea of a sculpture, because like thinking on traditional material, the sculpture is often all taking off, like if it is stone or wood, or it's about putting together like ceramic or other materials that are iron, metals. And I think this is true, even if performance, of course, I perceive it as a very important factor of your practice, both in terms of building and thinking and interacting. I do believe sculpture still as somehow is something you return to, and this idea of deconstructing monuments, and I don't know if you can tell us a bit about this album, and if you have something to
About how I see sculpture fitting in my practice, or?
Yes, and how works as monument, and how you will be working with ceramic.
I think I think it's a little bit of what I was saying at the beginning, like that sculpture. I mean, there's part of it I think is about not wanting to just like put more future trash into the world. Like in a real way, it just feels like not the vibe anymore. So I think sculpture to me has this, and it has like a certain I have friends who are sculptors, so I'm not like sculpture's the worst, but like there is like an air of like, if you go back at least in like Western sort of art history of like, there's a revered artist who makes, say, like the David or whatever, and it's only that artist, even though surely there were assistants, probably women or queer people or something who you just never know about, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's like forever but then you find out actually that even those sculptures, like they've done tests on these like Greek sculptures that are white, and they weren't white. Like even those sculptures that we think of as like so static aren't static. Like they painted them and that faded away, and now we're like, oh, they're white and white is purity and da 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 da. But like I think that like maybe all sculpture is shifting just on a different time scale, and I'm working on like a very fast time scale with materials that have a very slow time scale. So bringing cobalt in as just a powder. Also, I think like peeling it away. I was very interested in peeling it away to only the materials. So just showing those as opposed to showing how they end up or something. So some tension or play between that, like a time scale of composing and decomposing that you could see within like a month, along with, so that fluidity there, along with the real just like raw engagement with the raw materials. I guess is how I'm seeing sculpture via kind of performance and temporality now, if that is how it, yeah.
I think you forgot to tell the story about the
Composing, decomposing.
of the lake immigration of one of the components.
Oh, okay, right. So the other, like, the physical comedy section of the residency was that I had done research on, there's an enzyme that was discovered that can actually like eat plastic, and it's, kind of was like a real flashy like BuzzFeed news item a few years ago. But it's because another sort of interesting time scale is because bacteria and microbes and enzymes, they reproduce, they have, some of them have, like sort of infinite, like what we would call genders, because they're reproducing so fast, they just kind of do what's necessary. So like it would be the equivalent of me being like, I want to water these plants while I'm talking, so I'll just grow another arm right now. And then, so they are just like evolving so quickly that because these bacteria were in this dump with plastic, they just started eating the plastic. Anyway, I ordered an enzyme from New Zealand when I got here because it was going to decompose the elements of the sculpture even faster. And it's in customs as we speak. Gemma has been like talking with them because they think that I'm either like making drugs or a bioterrorist. It's a Chinese New Zealand duet of a cocktail of enzymes from the Asiatic Sea, but it didn't make it. Yeah, so the enzymes, but it became kind of interesting besides just thinking about the decomposition aspect of this aspect of like, because I also was gonna bring a SCOBY from the States, and I was like, I don't know if I can get it across a border. So thinking about like things crossing borders, like bacteria, enzymes, cultures, which obviously like things migrate, things are migrating now, things have always migrated. And how we view that is also kind of another eddy in the thought stream of that. Yeah. So if anyone tries to order enzymes, I don't know. Don't. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. Oh, you okay?
I got a question.
Yeah.
In the performance that you did in this second room,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that was more to capture the story of what had happened, or did you grow in that moving forward as you did the improv that made the choreography?
I wanted to I mean, I don't know what, I think that after having done it, like if we ever live in a world again where people could be maskless sliding through wet clay together, like my ideal would be that multiple people would build the sculpture as a collaborative act in front of other people, and it would be like a communal experience. So perhaps this was sort of some like desperate whisper to share somehow what happened in the room. I mean, I think it's like, I definitely, I prefer live performance live, I think would be like the sad, quick answer, but I did learn, yes, I think that it was fun to edit the video in such a way where I could think about my collaborators being sort of stars as well. So that was kind of my editing strategy, was things or microbes or other elements of the performance and sculpture creation, you know, not only centering my actions in the process. So I think, the editing maybe brought that forward for me in a way.
I think you overuse the collaboration pre-performance than the real live performance. So in these pandemic times, you work with you push the collaborative to the digital instead of the physical.
Yeah.
And at least that I accompanied the process, I can really see that in the final work.
Yeah.
That then it's more difficult for others to understand the difficulties, or in 10 years and 50 years when this pandemic is over. Why?
Right. You heard it here first. No enzymes. Max forever. Oh my God. No, thinking later. Well, time is nonlinear. We also learned that this month. But in 15 years, whatever that means, right, perhaps it's a record. Although, I mean, okay, and then there's the whole idea of like, that should the video be eaten by mycelium too? Like a record is sort of a weird thing in this schema of decomposing things, than to be like, my video is like kind of weird too. So maybe I'll like feed it to the mycelium or something, I don't know. We're gonna lose the video, so get it while you can.
Transfer to film and then use the New Zealand mycelium.
Yes. Have them forward me the enzyme to California.
So would you have your like the video record of it like on a server somewhere somehow or in the cloud?
That's an idea too. Although I also am like trying to be really conscious of like my, energy and use in terms of like training two AIs is like kind of messed up. The amount of like heat and mining and extractive processes that it took for me to explore this process about extractive mindset is also like this kind of, capitalist handcuffs we're all in as well. So I don't know like if I would want to continue making them work about this medium in that medium, or I don't know.
But instead maybe you'd make a copy of the work instead, because
right.
You know me, I love art.
Right, you're right.
So I'm
right.
Archive.
We gotta. It could still exist though. It would just have like maybe like, like when someone pours like an acetate on a piece of film or something. I feel like it would have a similar effect. So it would just be another another cycle of the process somehow.
Or a Wu-Tang Clan album that would be